Not one, not two, but 3 vegan businesses have announced their closure in Glasgow this week. It's Jaya, Soul Food Kitchen, and Plant Blonde. Right now it's pretty unclear if these businesses will return.
37.3 million is quite a big decrease in a market that we were told was increasing because everybody's turning vegan to save their health and the planet. Interesting that hasn't worked.
Back in 2019, vegan meat was the next big thing. Barclays even predicted that the alternative meat market would hit $140 billion by 2030. Fast forward to today, and that didn't happen. Beyond Meat stock has crashed by over 85%. Impossible Foods, another major vegan brand, had to lay off more than a quarter of its workforce, and the entire industry is struggling to stay afloat. So what went wrong? Why didn't the vegan brands take over like everyone expected? Stick around because the reason at the end might not be what you expected. But before we dive in, take a second to smash that like button. It not only supports the channel, but also helps more business-savvy minds like yours stay ahead of industry trends.
We're vegans. We're gonna spell cheese with a Z. We're dying of iron deficiency, protein deficiency, B12 deficiency. We're vegans. We tend to like animals more than humans. We're gonna complain about an upcharge for oat milk, and we're gonna remind you that there is no milk in Oreos. We're vegans. We're gonna ask if you watched Earthlings. We're gonna put barbecue sauce on cauliflower and call it a wing.
Veganism has been growing steadily for years, with around 4.7% of the UK population identifying as vegan in 2024. That's about 2.5 million people, an increase of 1.1 million since 2023. At its peak, vegan meat wasn't just a food trend, it was a novelty. The early days of Beyond Meat and Impossible Foods were driven by hype, curiosity, and shifting consumer behaviour, especially during the pandemic. Back in 2020, people were stuck at home, eating the same meals over and over. If you're alternating between chicken and beef every day, trying a plant-based burger suddenly seems a lot more appealing. It wasn't necessarily about being vegan, it was about switching things up. For companies, this was a golden opportunity. The industry boomed as people experimented with their diets, and retailers stocked their shelves with vegan options to meet demand. At the same time, movements like Veganuary helped normalise plant-based eating. The campaign, which started in 2014, challenges people to go vegan for the entire month of January. In 2023, it saw 707,000 participants, and by 2024, the number of vegans in the UK had jumped significantly. But the key shift wasn't just in the number of vegans, it was in how people approached plant-based eating. Instead of fully committing, many adopted flexitarian or part-time vegan lifestyles. Terms like Meatless Monday and pescatarian became widely recognised, making it easier for people to reduce meat without completely giving it up. Social media also played a huge role in making veganism more accessible. Influencers like Fern Cotton and Lucy Watson regularly shared easy vegan recipes and lifestyle content, shifting the focus from ethics to convenience.
Today, I'm going to make a recipe that I absolutely love from one of my cookbooks, spiced chocolate and cashew squares. It's something I make a lot that I love, the kids love. It's vegan, it's got lots of nice goodness in there, and they are so easy to make.
Instead of framing veganism as an extreme lifestyle choice, they made it feel casual and achievable. With all these changes, you'd think plant-based meat would be thriving, right? But instead, major food brands are quietly pulling their meat alternatives from shelves.
Here's the thing, meat appears to be back on the menu with veganism in decline.
That clip says, veganism is in the decline. And here's why. The vegan meat curious never became vegan meat loyalists. Many people were willing to try plant-based meat, but few stuck with it long term. As a result, an industry that was once booming is now struggling to stay afloat. Major brands have collapsed or scaled back. The Meatless Farm Company, once a promising player, ceased trading before being rescued by competitor VFC. Neat Burger, a vegan fast food chain backed by celebrities, has closed several outlets. Other restaurants have quietly added more meat options back to their menus. Sales figures paint an even bleaker picture. According to consumer intelligence firm NIQ, sales of chilled and frozen meat alternatives dropped by around 21% in the year leading up to June 2023, compared to the same period 2 years earlier. Even as dairy-free milk sales saw a small 0.8% rebound, meat alternatives continued to decline. Meanwhile, some of the biggest food brands have backtracked on their vegan offerings. Heinz disappointed some customers in 2024 by discontinuing its vegan salad cream to meet changing culinary trends and tastes. Other brands such as Heck, Oatly and Nestle have also reduced their vegan product lines in recent years. Innocent scrapped its dairy-free milk range in March 2023, joking that only 5 people actually bought it. Beyond declining sales and product withdrawals, Google search data suggests consumer interest in plant-based eating is fading. Searches for veganism, vegan diet, and vegan recipes peaked in late 2019 and early 2020, then steadily declined over the following years. So what led to the decline? Were consumers really that dissatisfied with the product? Why couldn't these brands hold on to their popularity and lead the way in making vegan products mainstream? Well, let's break it down. But before we do, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel. It helps with the algorithm and motivates us to keep bringing you more great content. For many consumers, vegan alternatives are simply too expensive.
Like that people eat in countries like the UK and the USA. People eat a lot of crap. People also say that a vegetarian or vegan diet is also cheaper.
Why wouldn't you go vegan?
Cost of living.
Too expensive.
To be clear, we're not talking about raw, naturally vegan foods like vegetables or grains. We mean processed vegan products, the ones designed to mimic the flavours and textures of non-vegan foods. These plant-based convenience foods have made veganism more accessible, but when these products come at a premium price, they start to feel like a luxury rather than an everyday choice. A 2024 study found that plant-based alternatives to sausages, burgers and milk were on average a third more expensive than their animal-based counterparts in UK supermarkets. But here's the thing, it's not really the producer's fault that vegan products are so pricey. These are a few key reasons why keeping costs low is way harder for the vegan industry. First, there's production. The meat and dairy industries have been around for centuries, refining their processes for maximum efficiency. Meanwhile, the vegan industry is still catching up. Making plant-based alternatives requires more labour, more technology, and more creative ingredient sourcing, which all drive up costs. Sure, the vegan market is growing fast, but it's still nowhere near as established as the meat industry, which has had a huge head start. Then there are government subsidisers. The US alone gives a jaw-dropping $38 billion to meat and dairy farmers every year. That's a massive financial boost that the vegan industry just doesn't get. These subsidisers help keep meat and dairy prices low, making plant-based alternatives look even more expensive in comparison. In the UK, meat and milk products are only taxed at 7% VAT, but meat substitutes have 19% added in tax. And let's not forget supply and demand. More people still buy meat than vegan products, which means meat companies can mass produce at lower costs. Vegan brands don't have that advantage yet, so their production costs per unit remain high. Even packaging plays a role. Meat and dairy often come in cheaper temporary packaging, while plant-based alternatives usually require better quality, more expensive materials, which of course adds to the price tag. While cost is definitely a factor, there's another reason some people are moving away from meat alternatives that are often ultra-processed and not always the best protein source for a vegan diet. What's interesting is that when people think of ultra-processed foods, they picture burgers and hot dogs, but vegan meat alternatives like faux meat burgers often carry a health halo thanks to good PR. In reality, they're just ultra-processed foods in disguise. With growing awareness of ultra-processed foods, many vegans are becoming more mindful about what they buy. The truth is, a lot of plant-based eaters don't want the highly processed lookalikes that big food brands assume they do. Supermarkets push vegan copies of meat products, but for many, eating a vegan diet is about embracing real food, not imitations. The problem with these ultra-processed foods is they're stripped of protein and fibre and packed with salt, sugar, and fat to compensate for loss of flavour. This makes them hyper-palatable, essentially engineered to be easy to overeat. In high-income countries like the UK, 50 to 60% of the calories people consume come from ultra-processed foods, and that has real health consequences. Studies show that countries with higher UPF consumption see more obesity and diet-related illnesses. These foods tend to be less filling, often requiring less chewing, which means people eat more without realising it, leading to higher calorie intake and weight gain. A 2024 UK study that grabbed headlines found that just a 10% increase in plant-based ultra-processed food intake was linked to a 5% risk of cardiovascular disease and a 12% greater risk of dying from it. This shows that relying on vegan products from big brands, most of which are ultra-processed, can have serious health consequences. With growing awareness of these risks, many vegans are rethinking their choices and, in some cases, even returning to meat. For some, the promise of a healthier lifestyle was a big reason for going vegan in the first place. But when the reality of highly processed, nutrient-stripped alternatives sets in, it's easy to see why some are choosing whole foods or even animal products over fake meats. Veganism hasn't just faced economic and consumer challenges, it's also become politically charged. For some, it's no longer just about diet, it's about ideology. Right-wing culture warriors have framed meat eating as a symbol of masculinity, while veganism is often dismissed as woke or associated with soy boys, a term used to mock men who embrace plant-based diets. In right-wing media, veganism has become synonymous with wokery, fueling resistance against it. Some right-wing voices view veganism as a challenge to national food traditions, particularly in countries where meat-heavy cuisines are a point of pride. In France, where meat and dairy are deeply ingrained in cultural identity, veganism has sparked strong resistance. In Italy, right-wing politicians have even proposed jailing parents who feed their children vegan diets, arguing that plant-based nutrition constitutes child abuse. Veganism is also frequently associated with urban, progressive and upper middle class lifestyles, leading critics to paint it as elitist and out of touch with everyday working class concerns. The rise of expensive vegan brands and plant-based alternatives has fueled the perception that veganism is for the wealthy, while meat is for the real, hard-working people. Beyond the politics, the products themselves are also falling short. Brands haven't lived up to the hype, failing to replicate the taste and texture of real meat in a way that keeps consumers coming back. Many consumers try plant-based alternatives once but don't make them a habitual purchase, and that's a huge problem for an industry that relies on repeat sales. Back in February 2022, the president of Maple Leaf Foods a major Canadian food company that jumped into the plant-based market in 2017, talked about the plant-based meat category. He pointed out how it had some amazing growth in 2019 and 2020, 59% and 75% respectively, but in 2021, that growth slowed down dramatically to just 1%. Why? Well, his take was that consumers' needs simply weren't being met, so they didn't come back for repeat purchases. It's a clear sign that even when the hype is high, if the products don't deliver, people lose interest. Supermarkets initially gave strong support to plant-based brands, dedicating shelf space and promoting these products. But as sales have failed to take off, that enthusiasm is shrinking. Retailers aren't interested in backing brands that continuously underperform, and many are now cutting back on plant-based offerings to make room for products that actually sell. Even vegan brands set themselves up for failure by making huge, unrealistic promises instead of letting actual sales do the talking. Instead of starting small and building a dedicated customer base, they went all in on mainstream appeal, assuming the demand was much bigger than it really was. Pat Brown, the founder of Impossible Foods, boldly claimed in 2020 that animal-based products would be obsolete by 2035, a prediction that, looking at today's market, seems more like wishful thinking than reality.
Well, our mission is to completely replace animals in the food system by 2035. And you laugh, but we are absolutely serious about it.
Beyond Meat's Ethan Brown made an equally ambitious claim, suggesting his products could solve heart disease, diabetes, cancer, climate change, and more. These wild predictions were amplified by animal rights groups and investors who bought into the hype, creating an echo chamber where plant-based meat was treated as the future of food, without any real evidence to back it up. The problem is that there was never a big enough mainstream market for plant-based meat in the first place. Most consumers just weren't interested. But instead of recognising this, brands flooded the market, overestimating demand and jumping straight into mass distribution. Silicon Valley think tanks fed into the hype, pushing reports that claimed plant-based would take over 30% of the market by 2030. But these numbers were based more on optimism than reality. They ignored food culture and actual consumer behaviour, assuming that if the product existed, people would buy it. Turns out that's not how the food industry works. Do you think these vegan brands can regain their footing in the market? Or is this the end for them? Let's discuss in the comments. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss more content like this. Thanks for watching.